Good evening, everybody. This is the planning board meeting of April 9th, 2018. If we could please stand for the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right. So the first thing tonight is an approval not required plan for Eugene Cobb, South Meadow Road and Old South Meadow Road. It's Assessors Map 116, Lot 1-15. So Stephen, if you want to, do we have anybody here representing this tonight? Or? Oh, this is the one we looked at the last meeting.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman. The paper maps you have before you are precisely what was reviewed by the board at the last meeting. You can see they really just kind of...
So what were we doing here? It's, is it a subdivision or were they swapping land
It
here?
says here, Mr. Chairman, that the A&R plan reconfigures law map 116, lot 3 to create a rear lot in conformance with the Carver zoning bylaw, section 2340, and it meets the condition of 2341 to 2345. The remainder of parcel 3B is a non-buildable parcel that is intended to be combined with the adjoining property of Eugene Cobb, shown on map 116, lot 5. The adjoining lots owned by Mr. Cobb, lots 1, 4, 5, 15, and the remainder of lot 3 will total 59.7 acres. These lots contain cranberry bogs, a water supply reservoir, and agricultural structures. Those should be reflected on the map before you. Sections going well? Yeah, I think 2341. 2341.
So these lots meet all the requirements. We do, and okay, so even lot 3A does have frontage.
Yep. Not less than 40 feet is required,
Okay, so it has 41.9 feet.
and the area of said lot is at least 3 acres.
3 acres. Mr. Chair, I make a motion to endorse the Form A for Eugene D. Cobb where it meets all the requirements for a rear lot.
I'll second that.
So we have a motion and a second. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So three in favor and 2 people that are not here.
Okay. Pass this down now, Mr. Chairman, if that's okay. We
Okay.
can have the board sign this. so
Okay,
that
right now?
interested parties aren't subject to the rest of this.
Sure. Do we also need the copies too?
I can collect the signatures for the paper copies after the meeting, if that's okay with the board,
Okay.
as we retain these in-house.
Okay. Here's your pen. All right, so next is a sign permit for Carver Foot Spa, 300 Tremont Street, Suite 2. Is there anybody here for Carver Foot Spa? No?
Do you have the original for the visual documents for the sign?
For the signs, they're contained there.
Yeah, just the original documents, so I guess. The first page.
Just keeping it together.
Yep.
So what do we know about this, Stephen, the Carver Foot Spa?
It's located at 300 Tremont. It's a plaza. According to the attached schematic of the sign, it is compliant with the sign bylaws. It's a white background image and letters here in black. Has a yin-yang to the left, massage prominently displayed, and the phone number down below. Appears this will be thin aluminum, 1/4 inch thick, 1/8 inch thick, held to the marquee by 6 2-inch heavy screws.
Okay. No lights.
No lights.
Is this already going in where there's a sign?
No, this
This
is
is a brand new
This is a
sign.
brand new sign for a brand new business, I believe.
This is the brand new business that
Says 300
is on the right-hand side, right? Street side is
Spend all that time looking for them.
right after the church? Is that right after the church?
It's where the Dunkin' Donuts is in South Carver.
It is where the Dunkin' Donuts is, so it's not the new place.
No, it's not the new.
Okay.
the new
I just wanted to
facility.
know which place, this is gonna go on the building opposed to out front on a signboard.
It's on, this is on the marquee. This is
I
a
know,
marquee.
but I
sign.
thought we weren't using the marquee language. So the marquee is also the place of the remaining signs for the businesses in there.
Hmm.
So there is room for it. Is
Yeah.
it taking place somewhere else? It's just basically replacing the same thing, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, it was
just,
with a new
probably
sign.
the doctor who was
Okay.
down there, he left and these people are going in there.
Isn't that funny? Isn't that funny? You did that photograph. No, I can't put it on the
That's all.
all right, so if it meets all the requirements, I guess usually somebody's here to explain the business, but I guess we can gather what the business is.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to approve this sign for, what is the?
Carver Foot Spa.
Thank you. With the following conditions, a building permit required, and no lighting.
I'll second that.
So I have a motion and second. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, so that's ready to go. So next on the agenda is the, I already explained it, 7 PM we had a public hearing on Edaville Land Holdings. But we are going to have, so what happened with that, Stephen? The plans have not been prepared yet?
That's correct. At the last meeting, it was requested that they provide a lighting study so as to determine whether or not the merits of a waiver they are seeking is still nonetheless consistent or compliant with the town's zoning bylaws, which require that public parking structures or facilities like a parking lot be evenly lighted as much as possible and contain on-site the light being emitted. We haven't received that, so until we do, the project is so far stalled.
So we're gonna continue this to our next meeting then?
That is staff's recommendation.
What's the
Okay.
next meeting date?
We haven't yet set one for this month. The board may recall, we are normally due to meet on the 24th, but that's the evening of our town meeting. So the next scheduled meeting date for us would be the first Tuesday in May,
Which is the 8th.
which is
I'm
the,
away.
excuse me, the second Tuesday in May, which is the 8th.
I'm away that week. And we would need me here for that.
For special permits, we need 4 to say, if I'm
You
not
do.
mistaken.
So we'd have to go out to the 22nd. then?
It would be the 22nd after the 8th, yeah.
And then you, where are you on your 90 days?
They're past that.
Okay, do they have an extension?
They do. The
Okay.
board has, well,
So I'll make a motion to continue the public hearing for Edaville Landings, Edaville Land Holdings, for Edaville Road to May 22nd at 7.
I'll second that.
Before I say anything here, we don't know what's happened, if the vice chair is going to be attending or not. Can we do this with remote participation if need be?
As long as you
Okay,
have a quorum sitting. So you need 3 people in the room.
so we need 3 people in the room, and if we need, okay, the 4th, we can do remote. All right, so we have a motion to continue the public hearing for Edaville to May 22nd at 7. Those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, so we're going on to the draft of the zoning amendments for 2018.
Yeah, the statute would be, and it's in the zoning manual, so do anything confused.
So the first
The Attorney General's.
amended bylaw
It wouldn't be formed by now.
was for the lighting. And so what did we change here?
I believe, Will, didn't you want to change the reading as fully as possible to something
Yeah,
a
there was
little more direct?
Yeah, where it says here that the planning board shall require the applicant to provide photometric lighting plan for all parking facilities which are used at night shall be determined if the parking facility will be lighted as evenly and as fully as possible. The photometrics plan was
Okay.
the key.
Okay, so that was added. Okay.
There, if I may,
Yeah.
I was going to call you Your Honor,
Your
Mr.
Honor.
Chair. I actually think I forgot an and. So the planning board shall require the applicant to provide a photometric lighting plan for all parking facilities which are used at night and shall determine if the parking facility will be lighted as evenly and fully as possible.
Okay,
Okay,
all right.
so I apologize for that.
No, better we pick it now than later.
Shall determine, okay, so that's a minor change.
Any other questions by the board? Any questions from anybody seated out in the audience? So we're just discussing the lighting amendment. Okay. Give us your name and address and.
Robert Belvin, 26 Gate Street. I don't live down by Edaville, but I do know people that live around that house. The house is right across the street from it. And if they come back after town meeting and amend their lighting plan, they could put them up to 20 feet, correct? And then direct them away from people's houses and screen or whatnot. How will that all come about with this bylaw changing it, the height restriction?
Their application has already been submitted, so they're held by the bylaw that's stated now, 11 and 15 feet.
Mhm.
And plus, it's up to the discretion of this planning board on whether or not to allow the 20 feet if it meets the requirements of the photometric plans. You're talking about public safety. So it'd be luminaires per square foot is what our engineer would be looking at to make sure it meets those requirements. It also states that it has to be shaded, so overspill is one of the biggest things. So it'd be directed towards the facility, was what the planning board or whether it's this board or any other board that's sitting here would be looking at, to direct it away from the residents.
Like I said, I do know people that live over there, and I know I hate to turn around and be looking out my window and just see all these lights lighting up, and if my bedroom's facing that they'll still get that glare from those lights at night.
That's the reason we're asking for a photometric plan, to
Okay,
make sure that the lighting stays in the parking lot, doesn't go onto the other people's property. That's the reason for that.
so I just wanna make sure that you guys explain this at town meeting, all right, because I don't think town meeting's gonna know what a photometric plan is and what it's gonna do and how it's gonna affect. But that would be my big thing because of Edaville Railroad and the houses that are beside it.
And Bob, just so you're aware, which is a good reason why I'm glad you brought that up. One of the key things, you're okay. One of the key things out there, and for the public to understand, is that we're dealing with public safety. And right now, is the way that the parking lot's lit up, he has approximately, and I'm just using Edaville because they have an application in front of us, and no effect on this if it gets approved at town meeting. That when you're looking at public safety, with them walking through there and the amount of traffic and stuff, you're looking so that way they're safe. And that's the biggest reason why we're looking to make sure that the photometric plan will show per square foot, the looms per square foot abides by the laws and the state laws for public safety. I'm glad you brought it up, Bob.
Not only for public safety though, but also to show that it doesn't spill over onto
Right.
other people's property. I've seen this done in other towns, so it's a good thing. All right, anybody else have any questions, comments? Seeing none, so...
Mr. Chair, I'd
Let's
like to
vote.
make a recommendation to recommend Article 1 as amended by this board for our town meeting.
I'll second that.
So we have a motion and a second. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those are three of us and two absent. So the next was zoning amendment 2. So what did we change here? This was to amend section 2230 for battery storage. Because battery storage wasn't in the regulations.
Mr. Chair, the board voted to advance or recommend this language to town meeting. With the change that was made initially, this was appearing in front of you as a by right in all districts.
That's right.
And town council took comments from the board and the public at the last meeting, and you can see before you now it is amended to special permit as issued by the planning board.
I don't have that. I have by right. That's the old one. Oh, okay, so special permit. Okay, so it's not, well, actually to amend the regulation schedule to include battery storage by right in the RA. But it isn't by right, I don't understand that. It's by special permit.
That by right should probably
be
be stricken and by special permit inserted.
Okay,
From the planning board should be inserted instead.
okay, well, let's, okay, so we're gonna do,
Point of order, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, but what you posted didn't include the second one on there, so technically you can't talk about it. It wasn't posted. Only 1, 3, and 4 were posted on the agenda.
You did vote on these.
It was already
You
voted.
voted to recommend.
Yeah, we voted to recommend.
Yeah, you've already voted to recommend it, so that, this change from by right
oh,
to
which,
special permit from the planning board can be made either
Was
in a
part of the
motion
vote.
or.
okay,
yeah,
so this was just
Yeah,
for us to look at, but it had already been
It-
voted
it
and
had already been
recommended. Okay, so,
it was a unanimous vote to recommend it.
okay, so we
With the
just see
change.
the asterisk, okay,
Yeah,
okay.
Okay,
So
Bob?
3. Zoning amendment 3, it's, okay, so this was for the large-scale ground-mounted solar photovoltaic installations, and this was for the setback distances. So what did we change here? What was the wordage we
Mr.
changed?
Chair, initially the draft language suggested that in lieu of the required 200-foot setback on the applicant's property in a residential agricultural district, staff initially recommended for discussion amending that to 300 feet from the nearest residential structure. At the last meeting, the board's recommendation, request to town council was to amend the language further to restore the 200-foot setback and add also that the planning board may reduce the required screening and may reduce the required setbacks to a distance not less than 50 feet, provided the LSG MPSI can achieve adequate screening to abutting and adjacent properties. There is a further provision of town council, if I'm not mistaken, that the nuance, right, that was a new section that was added as well? The nuisance?
Yes, the nuisance section was added. We had no changes to that at this point, at this time. But this was an amendment that was not voted on.
So we still kept the 200-foot setback, but we could reduce it
We could
because
reduce the screening.
What would be the purpose of reducing the screening?
Reducing the setback but maintaining screening is my recollection. Mr. Chair, it's
the reason we were talking about reducing the screening is if we had two projects side by side, and I think in one instance they were two lots owned by the same company or owner, and so it just seemed unnecessary to provide screening between the two.
Does this not affect residential though? Or is it just across the board that someone could decide?
It gives the planning board the right to look at this and to grant a waiver so that we could do 50-foot setback. But it's just because of odd situations that occur
Yeah,
that weren't anticipated when we came up with the original bylaw.
Right, I just spoke to Jim because I'm friends with Jim right before I came in, so I knew he was in Chicago. My concern is, as his was, because he was affected by it, I have property right behind me that is a bog, and the bog owner a couple of years ago put in a request to put in solar. And the only area in his entire lot that is going to be visible where he's putting the solar is directly behind my house. And it was not too long ago that he did some clear cutting of trees and got a permit to open that up. And of course, then cutting the edge cut out all the vegetation. So I immediately had a wide open view of the bog, and I never really had much. And now the plan is to put solar there. And if that provision is put in there to effect, and from what Jim said, like if two bog owners have abutting property, you shouldn't need, if they both want to put solar in, then who's going to care?
Right.
But in my case, if it just gets written in like that, and they can then pull back from 200, and my concern isn't so much the distance, because Jim said at one point they were saying from a structure, and that got pulled back and then said no from the property line. But my concern is more the screening, because if he's required to put some of that growth back up, I don't have a problem with what he does putting solar in. It's his land. I don't mind looking at his bogs, but I'm going to have a problem if I'm staring at solar panels instead of bogs.
Well, I think in this too, I think it's the planning board will look at that, and if it was close to your house, we wouldn't have the screening reduced. It was just for that
Alright.
particular instance.
I just don't know how you, so what would be, if it's that, then it's going to come down to a decision.
So, Mr. Chair, just so I can clarify you, under the bylaw that's stated now, that's still in this proposed bylaw.
All right.
It says, the planning board may reduce the setbacks to a distance not less than 50 feet, provided that the LSGMSPI, the developer, can achieve 100% screening to the abutting and adjacent properties. So you're not gonna see it. So he came in, this proposed
But
person.
he's probably
came-
like 200, which is my worry now, because if he has 200 feet, does he
still
not
has-
need screening?
He has to provide screening.
He does.
100%, so when you're in your house, you can't see
I
it.
don't see that.
And that is up to this board
All right,
to make that determination
All
of
right.
screening.
all right, so you would actually go out to the property and see what it looks like to
Oh,
determine
yeah.
that? All right, I have no problem.
We always do site visits,
Because it's
especially
wide
when it
open.
comes to this.
It's not wide open, this tree is wide. clear
So
view.
the only threshold at which that the screening is relaxed or the landscaping is relaxed is
Yeah.
if it's more than 500, 600 feet on the applicant's property line, and it still has some provisions for landscaping as well.
All right.
So the proposed change doesn't mitigate the intent of the bylaw, which is of course to protect the abutting
Sure,
neighbors'
all right.
visual rights.
Yeah, and I don't wanna stop him from, you know, if he's having trouble with his cranberries and he wants to put in solar, I don't wanna stop him from doing what he needs to do. I just don't wanna look at his solar
This was-
panels.
Yeah.
I wouldn't put him on the back of my house.
This was something that was brought up to us, and through multiple applications that have gone through this town that we've looked at. The chairman was correct, in certain circumstances, and I'm gonna give you an example. We had a large property owner in South Carver that was proposing 2 solar farms right next to each other. They had to, by the existing bylaw, in between them, provide a 200-foot buffer and a 200-foot buffer with vegetational screening. We couldn't waive that. They couldn't go to ZBA and get it waived. It just couldn't happen.
Right.
So this would allow the
Change.
planning board, under special permit,
Yeah,
the right to give that part of it,
Sure.
okay? And this was a way to bring that back to here during the site plan review, be able to
Sure.
give that if that's
Yeah.
there. There is, and it was public, right on the record of our last meeting, there wasn't a single person that sat on this board that was willing to give up the 200-foot from the property line. Absolutely not. I chaired the solar bylaw committee when we came up with this. It was a very contentious, long, drawn-out process that came out with a bylaw that was needed for this community. It needs to be tweaked. There's an ongoing lawsuit that's in this community between one board and another board because of ways to allow things to happen.
Sure.
And it's ongoing, I can't get into it,
Sure.
but this is why we're doing some of the tweaks that we're doing now. And that's why we have bylaws, is to come to the community, ask for input, bring it to the community and let them vote on it, and to tweak it as they seem fit. And correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Ward was at town meeting, and I know Bob was at town meeting, when we brought this to town meeting, it changed on the floor. It wasn't what the committee had recommended or the planning board had recommended at the time. It changed on the floor. So it's not that it can't be done on the
Sure.
floor, it's just something that we felt with the applications that were brought in front of this board throughout the years, that we need to tweak our bylaws.
Sure.
And personally, I think it's for the better, but that's only me.
Yep.
So, and I'm glad you asked the question, I'm glad you.
I'm a big
you
believer
bring
in
it up.
common sense. If anyone would go out, they'd see the fact that
The-
you wouldn't want to see solar panels here. It looks okay now.
Good evening, Mike Jones from Lakenham Drive. I went through this process back in 2015, and when did the 100% screening come up? And when was that established as a bylaw? Because I'm still looking at the underside of arrays from my kitchen windows, my back deck, everywhere.
The 100% bylaw has been in effect since we enacted that bylaw.
Okay, because May 2015, I asked about the screening, we'll address it. I'm still looking at solar panels.
And we'll bring that, we'll take a look at it. I'm glad you brought that up.
Thank you. That's why I'm here tonight, just to make sure no one else gets waylaid by that.
Was that the first solar panel
That's
project?
one up by the,
The old
It's on the
landfill.
dump, the old dump landfill.
on 50
Oh,
North Carver Fire Department.
okay.
He was the abutter that was to the,
I'm in the middle, right next to the wardens. They look down on the top of the
Yeah.
panels,
Yeah.
I look up based on the terrain.
I remember that hearing, we went through that quite a bit, and I know that there were, by the bylaw, there was provisions in there to address that.
Still waiting,
So,
thanks.
Well, it's noted, so we'll take a look at it, and see what we
and
can
please
do.
don't go away. If it doesn't happen, please come back and
That's why I'm here.
let us know.
And sir, if I could grab your contact information. at the end of the
Absolutely.
meeting.
First name on the sign-in
You already
list.
signed in? Okay,
Yep.
excellent. Thank you.
Alan Jermaine, 24 Pine. I think the 50-foot idea and the flexibility of that is a great idea. I'd like to see a little more restrictive language so that your future boards, because you guys know exactly what you were trying to accomplish here, and I think that's awesome. I'm not so sure that 5 years down the road, these future boards are gonna understand what you wanted, and we could all of a sudden find setbacks of 75 feet, 65 feet. It didn't really fit in that corner, so we moved it. And it can get away from you because there's a lot of room with you allowing a variance of 50 feet. I'd kind of like you can go ahead and give the variance of 50 feet under the following circumstances, or under the following conditions, or however you want to put it. But I'd like to see a little bit of restriction in where that can be used. Not that I don't trust this board, and I want that very clearly understood, because I absolutely mean this sincerely. I've met with Steve several times. You guys have no idea how lucky you are to have him with you. He knows his stuff, and he's, unlike me, he's not abrasive.
That question.
You ask a question and you get a straight answer, and I like that. But I can't speak for who knows what's coming after you.
But the thing is, I think we wanted the flexibility because we don't know exactly what's gonna come before us. And it depends upon the topography, and it depends upon abutting properties. And I don't know if anybody, we just wanted the flexibility because other boards were able to grant waivers, and we couldn't, and we just wanted to keep it with ourselves.
And I agree with you, Mr. Chairman, I truly do. And the fact of the matter is that more and more people in this town really have to start relying on their elected officials and their appointed officials, and, you know, start to put some trust in stuff, because everybody can play Monday morning quarterback. You can also see how that down the road, this can get away from you with the wrong people sitting up at that table. So it's just an idea. Obviously, town meeting can do whatever they want, and, you know, I think if you explain it the right way, town meeting will, you know, it'll go through just fine.
Anybody have any comments to answer this? Any feelings about this?
Let me think about it. I think the idea for more restrictive conditions, if the board feels that the applicant has demonstrated the issue of the reduction to 50, that the applicant is going to meet A, B, C, and D. Something to that effect. And what that A, B, C, and D would be is
I'd leave
probably
that up
more
to council and the
screening,
board, sure.
more screening, more whatever. I honestly don't even know how to fill in
A
those
could be
blanks.
that he's, you know, it's out in the field and he's got another bog right beside him and there is no abutter out where he's trying to put it. So that's a
Right.
perfect spot to say 50 feet is fine,
Right.
Yeah.
you know? But we go to, like, you look at Edaville's property where they're trying to do their solar, and if you were to roll back to 50 feet to that property line, you'd have it in the next door neighbor's backyard. So that could become a problem.
I'm glad you brought that up.
Mr. Ward?
Dick Ward, 20 West Street. I'm a cranberry grower and I'm a solar farmer. So I guess I'm in a way low minority here. Anyway.
I mean, if I can run an extension cord to your house.
You don't need to. The town's receiving a pretty good in lieu of taxes from that project, so it's helping. I was hoping that this amendment might give the possibility of some relief. I had in mind a project that would be growing my fresh fruit cranberries with the solar above it. So we would carry on our cranberry operation the way we do now, and we would also have solar. So we wouldn't be eliminating our agriculture. We don't want to just grow vines, we want to grow cranberries because we are fresh fruit growers. And that's probably the only way you could do that. But anyway, back to, I have 5.5 acres of solar, and it's interesting. The buffer must include the road, the panels are here. There needs to be a road and the fence, which we did on ours. And it ends up being 200 and maybe 25 feet to get to the fence in order to provide that that space, because, so the panels are back 225, 230 feet, 1,000 feet. So I give up on that 225 feet, some 5.5 acres, just to keep that buffer. And I don't mind that, because I was on the Ag Commission when we were talking about this, and I feel that it's very important for us to protect our neighbors. And I don't think anybody should have to look back in their backyard and look at my solar panels. Absolutely not. But my solar panels are 700 feet from any of my neighbors. But anyway, the idea of some possible relief through your board in a case like the corner of this proposed idea I have is gonna be a little less than 200 feet to my abutter, the Sportsman's Club. It's not a lot, but I mean, it might be 175 feet instead of 200, just that corner. So that's why I had hoped that maybe there would be a possibility of some relief if I went forward with that.
I think that's the type of situation we're looking at too. I mean, unless the Sportsman's Club had, I mean.
Well, I haven't pursued the project yet. I just, it was explained to me last week. So I haven't had a chance to pursue it with my neighbors or with the Sportsman's Club or with the cemetery is my other boundary. I haven't talked to them.
We don't need you to rush there either. It's a great, and just to address your theory there on that proposed idea. Under the new bylaw that we're proposing to go to town meeting, under that application, or what you're explaining, that would give this board the ability to reduce that 200 foot as long as you still had the buffer and stuff like that. And it doesn't have a detrimental impact to the neighbors. That's the key. Some people might say in that instance that, okay, you have the Sportsman Club, which is a private club that has activities and functions and stuff like that. Does it directly impact the neighbors?
Well, I will not pursue it if they didn't want it.
And I know you, Mr. Ward, for a lot of years, and a lot of people in town know you, the quality of person that you are, and we know that you wouldn't do that, but it gives a great example. Now, we can look at that similar position with the cemetery. Some people in the town would say there's no impact to them. Well, it's me going to a cemetery, I might want that privacy while I'm visiting with my family, and would want to have that effect of that. So there's that type, and I'm glad you brought the scenario up, because it gives that a better view for this community to take a look at the bylaw that we're trying to propose to bring to town meeting. And that would give the flexibility of this board for an application of that, or something like that, to look at that application and say, well, it's not directly impacting, a residential part, somebody's house, somebody, like this gentleman was saying, right in his backyard. What type of buffering that we would require an applicant in your scenario to have to gain that 30 feet or gain that 50 feet that we would reduce from the 200-foot setback. Because the 200-foot setback's still there. But it would allow this board to be able to say 170 feet because he needs this one little piece and he's going to provide this more of a buffer and blah, 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 blah. And it doesn't directly impact the neighbors, doesn't directly impact the structures next to it or anything like that. That would give this board, if this was approved at town meeting, the ability to do that. Right now, we're cut and dry 200. And we can't do that. And we've had that position come up in front of us. So thank you for bringing that. That's an important concept.
Thank you.
Savory Moore, 12 South Main Street. Along with your point there, my question is, how much of a say does an abutter have to say no? If someone comes before the planning board and wants to adjust that 200 feet, does it come to, is it the advisory of the planning board to make a decision, or can the a butter just say no, and then you have to comply with that?
That's interesting, because I was thinking the same thing. Personally, I wouldn't reduce the setback requirement if the abutter didn't want it. That's just my personal feeling. But, like it's been mentioned before, if I go and somebody else takes my place and sees it differently, they could reduce that 200-foot setback. If we reduce that setback and we did 100% screening,
Mr. Chairman, the change was to achieve adequate screening because the concern of last meeting was you would, even when you had a situation with two installations next to one another, you would have 50 feet and you would still have to require 100% screening. So
right.
it was kind of contrary to what the whole goal was, which is that they don't need screening. So that's why we changed 100% to adequate. So the board would determine that between two solar installations, their adequate screening is no screening.
All right.
But I think kind of what was being brought up was just, there are rules in place now, and if someone objects to it, then just roll back to the rules. If there is some flexibility, I think like you were saying, if there is some flexibility, then you're willing to hear it and say, all right, yeah, if nobody's opposed to this, then why can't we just change the bylaws a little? But if somebody is opposed, then let's go right back to the letter of what it states.
Yeah, the scenario I was thinking about was if someone perhaps owns a property that's large enough to be split into two separate properties somewhere down the line, and this person wants to perhaps leave this property to his or her children. And the vacant part of the lot is the abutter to that wants to put in solar. There's no structure there. So, I mean, would the planning board be able to say, okay, 50 feet is fine, and if the abutter objected saying, I want to give that property to my child in 20 years or 15 years, so I don't want the 200 feet, is the resident guaranteed to get what he or she wants?
And just so I want to answer Savory's to the best of my ability. Under the existing bylaw that's in place now, under 358060 special permit, in the event of a special permit is required from the LSGMPI, the planning board may grant a special permit if the following conditions are met. 1, such use will not nullify or substantially degrade from the intent of the purpose of the bylaw. Number 2, such use will not constitute a nuisance. Number 3, such use will not adversely affect the neighborhood in which it is sited. And that's a thing I think you're hanging your questions
It's really
at.
more affecting the abutter.
And that's a neighborhood, is it an abutter?
Right. But
And number 4, such use complies with the standards for the site plan review as spelled out in the bylaw. And number 5, the planning board may also provide for other conditions that it deems necessary. That's today's bylaw. We haven't even asked to change it.
Okay.
So those are in there. So if you, for instance, say that I come in with a large solar project, and you're my abutter, and you say, I don't like it, and this is why. It's direct, and we had this problem with the initial forestry project. There were abutters there that had this impact, and that's why we went through the reason of coming up with this. At the time, we didn't have a solar bylaw. And number 2, there was abutters there that were not only in Middleborough, but also in Carver that was saying, listen, this is directly impacting me under the bylaw, and that's why that section's in there, and that's why I was adamant that we put it in there. That gave the right for this board to say no. So the applicant could appeal that decision, which is fine, that's their thing, but it would give this board say, because the neighborhood or a neighbor felt that it was degrading to them, directly impacted their lifestyle, whatever, and proved his case to this board on the applicant, then we could say no.
Okay.
And that's still there.
My concern really is for the not so much for the protection of what the abutter has currently, but what the abutter may want to do in the future. And if the solar plan comes first before the abutter
Yeah.
makes his plans for that property, how much of a right does the abutter say, look, I'm not sure what I'm gonna do here, but I want the 200 feet?
And that would be one of those things that you could come up to us and say, or to any of these boards, under those 5 or 6 conditions, and state that, because you could have a development that's all vacant land.
True.
And I have a parcel, I have a bog that I want to do solar, because the solar might help me
Pay the bills.
would pay the bills and substantiate, we went through that whole big phase of, building houses and selling uplands, so that way the cranberry industry survived, and this is just another way. Now there's other techniques that are out there that Mr. Ward was suggesting, that growing the crop underneath these solar fields. That being said, we don't know what I'm gonna put on my property, but I could say, I still want to reserve that right of privacy.
Yes, that's,
So allow me to have that buffer, allow me to have the natural vegetation, so that if I do, or my kids do, or my grandkids do somewhere down the road and decide to develop, it doesn't directly impact my property. My interpretation.
right, again, but back to what
I
Alan
might
said
not- I
earlier,
won't be
5
here.
years down the road,
I won't be here.
what's it gonna, what
Then
the people
again-
gonna say?
14 years ago, I didn't think I'd still be sitting there.
Okay.
Go ahead.
And that's exactly, that entire bylaw is exactly what you just said, Will. It's your interpretation. It's the board's interpretation. It's a nuisance to us, but you don't think it is. It's an inconvenience to us, but you don't really see that. It's a detriment to the neighborhood, but you don't live in that neighborhood, so you don't think it's all that bad, and he's just a pain in the neck. So that's the only place, I just wanted to tighten the line. I agree fully with what you're trying to do, I couldn't support it more. I'm just afraid of the abuse that can happen down the road with someone that's not as honorable as this board.
And that's very well stated, and the boards change every year.
Absolutely. And I mean that sincerely. I find that this board acts on the best interest of the town, and you listen to everybody when they have a complaint, and you analyze it, and you vote what you think is the best idea you can have, and I think it's worked out awesome. But that's not to say that we've all watched videos of other towns have their selectmen's meetings where you need a set of boxing gloves up and you might as well have a ring.
We used
So
to
it's,
have that.
it's not always kumbaya.
Mr. Chairman, if you wanted to provide some directory language, you could possibly put at the end, so when it says, distance not less than 50 feet, provided the installation can achieve adequate screening to abutting and adjacent properties, we could add a sentence saying, any such reduction, planning board will not grant any such reduction without taking into consideration abutting uses, topography, and impact to the neighborhood. And that would simply just give a future planning board the direction as to what they need to look at.
And what your intent was, yeah.
I'm good with that.
That would tighten it up.
Yeah.
And that would be great.
Okay.
I don't
You
know what I
agree?
just said.
I missed a part, so I was hoping to remember what
Oh,
you
okay,
said.
so, can achieve adequate screening to abutting and adjacent properties, and then period, the planning board, oh, no. No, the planning board shall not issue, no, the planning board shall not reduce any setback, no, sorry, shall not reduce any required screening or required setbacks without taking into consideration abutting uses, topography, and impact to the neighborhood. Got it?
Mhm.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well done.
Should we also include approval from that abutter?
I would recommend no, because I think that would be very hard to defend. So, because you could then have a very unusual, hopefully never situation of a arbitrary abutter that is just objecting out of spite or something. And then that, unfortunately, that arbitrary and capriciousness would be reflected on the board by making that decision. So this is the discretion of the board, it's not the discretion of the abutter.
But under those conditions.
You have to listen to the
Yeah.
abutter. You would have to take
Yeah.
into consideration everything that they're saying. And more than the abutter, because you're saying impact to the neighborhood. So it would be more than just a direct abutter. You would be looking at the whole big picture.
And you'd absolutely know if it was a situation of the Hatfield and McCoys, so I mean, that wouldn't be any town secret anyhow. So you'd know if somebody came and was just hammering at it, you'd know exactly what they were hammering for, that there's nothing you could give them that was gonna make them happy, so then you could go along with, you know, what you think was the best idea. But it gives the abutter the opportunity to say, here's why, you know.
Under these conditions, yeah.
Like Savory said, you know, maybe I want to give it, you know, there's enough room there someday to build a little house, and I want to put my grandchildren in there, you know.
Bob?
Last thing for me, at least for this, is having adequate screening. It's kind of vague when you turn around and say adequate screening, because that's a kind of a subjective thing and to determine. I know what you're saying about two different places and you don't need it there, but will this language here help with the screening issue? Because like I said, when you say adequate screening, well, adequate to you isn't different than adequate for him, who has a property, and adequate to somebody else.
What does the
So
bylaw say about, how do they define adequate screening?
It's a new provision.
It's a new, that's new language. However, the next paragraph down in the existing bylaw, which we have not touched, says that that is where the screening comes in, and it says that every abutting property shall be visibly and acoustically screened from the installation through either existing vegetation or new plantings of not less than 8 feet in height. So the board would have to take a look at all of this, take a look at what they're proposing and determine whether it's existing. And
Okay.
so what would have to be proposed would still have to be 8 feet in height at the time of planting, staggered, the whole thing.
Oh, so, but there is language in there that actually puts a height on it, not less than 8 feet.
And staggered
What
plantings.
if said property is up on a hill and looks down?
Well, that's topography, so.
That's what I got.
Welcome to my
That's
life.
what I got.
Yeah.
I'm looking down on the
That's
bottom.
topography, so.
An 8-foot tree isn't gonna
So
help you
there,
much.
there could be an objection, I guess, you know, about moving the solar field closer to the property line. But in some cases, it's almost impossible to screen it, because if you're up on a hill and the solar panel's down in a valley.
If I could get back the damn vegetation he cut down, I'd be all set. But he's already cleared it out. So
All it takes is
now I'm
one
looking
gypsy
to
moth
6.
infestation,
Yeah.
wiped out the sparse dryad, so.
All right, let me, if
That's okay.
you may, Mr. Chair, under the existing bylaw that's in place now, under 3580-25-1, okay, and I'm gonna go back, I'm gonna go down a paragraph. Every abutting property shall be visibly and acoustically screened from the installation through either existing vegetation or new plantings of not less than 8 foot in height at the time of planting, staggered at spaces of not more than 8 foot apart throughout the required setback dimensions. All required plantings shall be maintained throughout the project's life and replaced as necessary. As an alternative to providing the required screening through vegetation, it is acceptable to increase the setbacks to 600 feet on the applicant's property while providing an acceptable alternative screening as a stockade fence, a single row of vegetation in close proximity of the project. So it's increasing that setback even further. That's in today's existing bylaw.
All right, so if you were to go out and look at it and see that 8 foot isn't gonna do anything, you might push it back another 100 feet by the bylaws as they exist now.
And we're not changing that. That's still there. So there's a lot of, there's
Sure.
awful lot to
I'm
the
glad
bylaw
I
that's
know
sitting
this,
there.
because I know what he's looking to do right now, and I'm not,
You know what
Okay
the
with
best
it.
thing that is happening right now? Everybody that's sitting in this room is part of the process, and we're getting it out to the public so they understand what's existing today.
sure. Yep.
So that means if you don't have the vegetative buffer, then the setback could be 600 feet instead of 200.
And you'd still have to provide some vegetated or
That's
a
fair in
fence.
the case of a neighbor. I feel for people.
It's tough to say.
Have to look at solar rather, you know, we got a cranberry bog. One of our people said they like looking out over the cranberry bog.
Yeah.
You change that to solar
Mm,
and they don't like looking at it.
Understandable.
There's a lot of, like you said, there's a lot of gray area, because there's quite a bit of trees between my property and the cranberry bog. It just so happens they're 60-foot pines. And now that they cut down what was on the edge, you're just looking at a bunch of sticks, and you can see right through. And again, it's not a bad view now, when it's a cranberry bog that's maintained.
It does say in the bylaw that the buffer should be maintained, so
Yeah.
if stuff dies, the plantings die, and then if you people come before us, then
You'd have to
it
force
should be replanted.
Yeah.
So you should have recourse to force that.
All right, any other questions, comments?
You're off the hook.
Still gotta go through town meeting, and then there's always next
Well,
year.
we got marijuana coming, don't worry.
Yeah.
You ain't that far.
Any other questions or comments by the board?
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to recommend zoning article 3 as amended by council with the proper language for town meeting.
I'll second that.
So we have a motion and a second, those in favor?
Aye. Thank you, everybody. That was very helpful.
Worked out a lot of problems and the way we look at the bylaw.
It's unique, you know.
All right, this is an easy one. Amendment 4. This is to amend the Town of Carver zoning bylaw for purposes of regulating the recreational use of marijuana establishments within the town. And so what did we do here? Oh, we had a problem, one, with the maps, I guess.
That's right,
I don't know if
Mr.
anybody had a
Chair,
problem with
we
that.
wanted some visual representation of the areas. There are some copies here in the front, if anyone's interested.
Yeah, do we have
The
enough?
language, as it's proposed under the medical language and the adult use / recreation, we are mimicking the language. So the industrial A sites are right now what is provided for or allowed for in the medical. And it's what is now being proposed for the adult use. They appear in South Carver, highlighted in green, identified in the legend as industrial A. Mr. Chair, there was a second matter too, with regard to Mr. Sinclair's inquiry. Town council informed us at the last meeting that a number over 20% of the number of package store licenses in town could be the cap of licenses permitted in the community in the marijuana overlay districts. Staff has done some research. We've obtained a list. I think that was included in the board's packet that was sent digitally this week. We have 4 package stores in the community that are fully licensed liquor stores, and 20% of that would be 0.8. Council, we have to provide at least 1,
So it would be
correct?
2.
And I think that language should be included in the bylaw, that there be a maximum of only 2 licenses given out. Because if we can take advantage of the law that's out there, then I'm all for that, and we know how many liquor licenses. The only question that I have for clarification though, and what if after this bylaw is passed, if it's passed, and we put a determination that under the existing liquor licenses, we have to provide 2 licenses for this, that there's more liquor licenses.
So every town is grappling with that. This language in the act is some of the worst, most ambiguous language. It's actually licenses issued. And so you could have a town that has licenses that are not issued. They're available, they just haven't been issued. So there's a lot of problems with this language. So what we've determined in our group at our firm is that the town would have to provide the 20%. At some point, the bylaw would probably have to be amended, but it would be illegal for the town to, so say you petition the general court for, 10 more liquor licenses or something like that. The town would have to issue as many retail licenses that's over 20%. However, you cannot petition the general court for liquor licenses without going to town meeting first.
Right.
So therefore, hopefully we would be able to coordinate,
So
that-
change and change.
There would be, yes, exactly. So hopefully, that is our hope, but obviously that doesn't always happen. But you would have to keep that number higher.
Well, me personally, I think that we should include that. And I'm up for a
For the
discussion.
maximum of 2?
Maximum of 2 based on the 20% of the liquor licenses that are in the town.
As of right now.
Right.
It seems fine with me. Any questions?
with that.
Okay. All right, let's go front first, and then we'll go to the back row after.
Okay.
Go ahead.
No, I just, Copeland Page actually printed a thing about this, and in it, it actually says that it's 20% of the number of licenses issued within the municipality for the retail sale of alcoholic beverages, not to be drunk on the premises where sold under Chapter 138 of General Law. So if it's sales of alcoholic beverages, we have more than 4. I'm just reading what you said, you shook your head, but I'm just saying, we have more than 4 alcoholic sales in the town, because we have both New England Farms, we have Dave's Liquor, we have the liquor store in the center of town, we have Jamie's Liquor up top, and then you have Carver's Liquor too. So there's more than just the 4.
You're including the beer and wine.
I'm including beer and wine
Farms
because-
on full liquor license.
Right, but that's not what Copeland and Page wrote. It's sales of alcoholic beverages. That's what they said. Not liquor, it's alcoholic beverages.
So would that be beer and wine?
The statute references 138, section 15, which is package store licenses.
Okay.
So it would not be beer and wine?
It would not be. It would not be restaurants, it would not be beer and wine. It's whatever licenses are issued under 138, section 15. And those are all alcohol licenses.
That's interesting. Good. Go ahead.
The other question I had, thank you, Bob, by the way. The other question I had was, we're gonna use a 20% number and we only have 4 licensed package stores. And it's 0.8, but we're gonna allow 2. Should we somehow show how we got to that number by a percentage? Because that math doesn't really work. That could come out to be interpreted that we're allowing 50% of our outstanding liquor licenses to be used for, and I'm in favor of two licenses issued, because I don't think we should just have one, because I don't think we should grant anybody the exclusive rights to anything. So I'm in favor of 2, but just the way the numbers all seem to go here, we seem to be setting up a precedent for we're doing 50%.
So how did that work?
It has to be a number over 20%, and so 0.8 would bring it to 1 license. So it should be a number over 1.
Oh, it has to be over 1.
Why? Well, it has to be 1.
Well, because this is another very gray area of this statute that is that it's 20% or over. So, and then the other issue, I think that if it is 0.8, you would have 1, license. So if you wanted to go with one license, I think you probably could. There would be no room for any other liquor licenses or anything. So I think that if you wanted to go with one, you could. I think that we would have to make sure that all of these licenses that gentleman mentioned, we'd have to check how they were issued and make sure that they were not issued pursuant to 138 section 15 and that they were issued beer and wine instead of all alcohol, because you could have someone that was issued under 138 section 15 but doesn't sell everything. So so we'd have to be very certain before town meeting.
Okay.
And would it be possible if there was a way to, for it to read, in the event that 2 happens to be half of 50, that it doesn't necessarily have to be up to half as many?
No, but what you could, I mean, you can still amend this on town, you have to amend this on town meeting floor anyway, because the warrant has been published as far as I know. So.
But I understand where he's going with
Yeah.
that. So, you wouldn't want to think now if it's 6, it's going to be 3. If it's, let's say it jumps up to 8, now it's going to be 4.
Right, so if you wanted to put, well, it has to be a number over 20%. It could be whatever number the town meeting wants it to be, as long as it's over 20%. So,
My point was to
I have
lock it down
towns-
to 2 makes it 50%, and then when we have 7 liquor licenses suddenly out there, now all of a sudden we're looking for 4.
no, the number is the number. The way it's drafted is it says only 2 marijuana retailers will be allowed to operate in the MOD at one time.
Oh, so that solves that problem.
That's the language.
So if you wanted to add a third, that would require another bylaw change and a
Correct.
warrant and a
Correct.
town meeting vote.
Not to mention it has to coordinate anyway, like you said,
Okay.
with the new liquor store coming in.
If the general court allowed more licenses for the town.
Hi, Paul Brennan, 12 Church Street. I just wanted to find out if there is any sort of provision language that identifies the differences in these licenses. When you're saying retailers and we're capping it at 2, I'm wondering if we're taking into consideration the other 3 licenses that are being issued by the Cannabis Control Commission for cultivation, manufacturing, and laboratory testing, all of which do not allow retail sales to the public. And if those will be licensed in town, and if they will be licensed separately or zoned differently than the actual retail dispensaries that sell to the public.
So this provision right here with the number of licenses, this so-called 20% provision, only applies to marijuana retailers. So you cannot limit the amount of cultivators, you cannot limit the amount of testing, you cannot limit the amount of processing. None of that can be limited. Only marijuana retailers can be limited.
Thank you.
So under the act for medical marijuana, the facility is called MMTC, which is Medical Marijuana Treatment Center. Under the new act for recreational marijuana, they are called marijuana establishments. And underneath this umbrella of marijuana establishments are marijuana retailers, marijuana processing, marijuana independent testing laboratories, cultivators, craft cultivators. There's numerous licenses. The CCC will be issuing separate licenses for what the facility wants to do. So here, you can only, under this 20% rule, you can only limit retailers.
Another question related to that. I know that in town, so this marijuana overlay district, does that apply only to retailers, or will cultivators and manufacturers, whatnot, be allowed in other industrial or commercial areas of town?
This overlay district is for, what's in front of us right now, this overlay district is for marijuana establishments, so this would be all of them.
And all of them will only be allowed in the green areas, whether it's retail, cultivation, any of it? Thank you.
As long as and the medical marijuana too will be in that area.
So my
they have
bog
a little
owner
bit
can't
different.
convert to weed. My bog owner can't convert to weed rather than his cranberry.
He can convert to hemp.
down here.
He can convert to hemp under section 61A property. Can currently, as of today, you can plant industrial hemp seeds, and they're not regulated as marijuana.
but they are marijuana.
If they're a cousin, you can't get high on them. You make rope out of them.
But there are regulations coming out from the Department of Agriculture on hemp,
All right.
so that might not be forever.
Was there another person in the back there?
Hi, Joe Casey from Walpole, Massachusetts. Thank you for that clarification. I did not realize that the limitation only affected retail outlets. I'm looking to build a greenhouse, 20 to 50,000 square foot greenhouses for cultivation. Looking at this zoning map, is there space allocated for this in this town? And if not, has the board perhaps given thought to the economic impact that such a facility could have?
Well, we do have our overlay district, and that would be something that, if you could find a place to put it, somebody to...
That's someone else who's also applying for a license in the state of Massachusetts. By essence of where the marijuana overlay district is in the town of Carver, you almost zoned it out of the community. All of that property is currently owned by some bigger industrial properties, and there's not, I mean, I'm not looking to do anything as big as he is, but finding a spot in that district that's not either already a wetland, a cranberry bog, or owned by Deacon's, Ocean Spray, or the cement plant, there's not property in those areas to accommodate for any of the larger scale cultivation.
Chair, it's okay with town council to respond to that?
That was brought up at the last meeting, and as I explained, what the land is used for, who owns the land now, doesn't mean that that's going to be the same in the future.
Right.
And so the board is providing an adequate area for an overlay. It's not a tiny, it's not a small, minute area. It's also the area that medical marijuana is in right now, so.
Now, could we revise that
Yes,
if we felt at
yes.
some point in time?
Mhm. It's a zoning map change. We would just go back to town meeting with a new overlay district, a new overlay map.
Which would have
adjusting.
to go to town meeting?
Yes, it would be a zoning change. It's a zoning map change. But to adjust the lines, you would have to go to town meeting.
So this is just the beginnings, yeah,
The whole thing is the beginning,
yeah.
yes.
Bob?
I actually have a bunch of questions, but we'll start with because you're talking about the overlay district now, and he brought up, so I've researched our zoning maps on how you did medical and where it's located now, industrial A. And he is right, all those properties are taken by wetlands or private businesses or whatnot there. There's nothing for sale there. The other one on the southern end, today.
Sure.
On the southern end, where you have two companies that own, you have 80 Makepeace and you have Ocean Spray plant that's down there. I mean, who's gonna go down there that far to put anything down there? All right, and are they willing to sell that property to somebody in this type of thing? And I seriously doubt it. These are major corporations, I don't think they're gonna sell. They probably have other plans for those properties anyways, okay? So, I mean, by creating this district here for the marijuana overlay district, really is kind of, it's like saying you can't have it here in this town.
So Bob, just to answer your question, just so that way the public understands what your interpretation is. This gentleman in the front row that just raised his hand while you was making that statement that he would be the first one to buy that property to establish his business. So when you say it, the interpretation out to the public that by doing this doesn't allow that to happen, what the existing businesses are there today and what might happen tomorrow, if I knew how to play that lottery number, I'd do that. But I don't know any of their business plans. If you do, I'd love to hear it.
Well,
What's Deacon's business plan?
I don't know what their business plan, but I did talk to them when we went through the first time if any of those properties would be for sale at ever, and they says no, they use it for their business that they have, they don't intend on selling it. That was a number of years ago. okay? I can say that the last property that was sold on this district here was $1.1 million. Was
Okay.
$1.1 million that was sold, and it was a very large lot, okay? So, like I said, I just see this, even what Copeland and Page wrote in that little spiel they did. One of the things they did write is that bylaws are not unreasonably impractical. I can't say that. Don't tell me to say it 3 times. So, I mean, is this overlay?
That's your interpretation, that you think it's unreasonably
Yes.
stuck.
Exactly. So, I'm gonna present to you a change of your overlay district. It would get rid of the one where 80 Makepeace and whatnot is, and it would introduce 2 more. It would increase the overlay district on the southern end, because some of the residents wanted to change their property to commercial from Sipet Street all the way down to our other one, that we should change our overlay district so it would look like that. It would bring it all the way from Sipet Street all the way down to the existing industrial A, having that whole part industrial A. Okay, so when you pull down
Tremont Tire and.
down by Tremont Tire, would all be
That would
industrial B.
require a zoning change
Correct.
to
But-
make that IA.
But we could turn around and make that the overlay district and then come back and do it for commercial at a later date.
Which this would, your proposal, and I'm glad you're sharing it with this board, your proposal would have to be made at town meeting, because warrant's already been stated.
Correct, I'm just letting you
Yeah,
guys know
I like
where
that.
I'm at for it. And the other one was the industrial A up in North Carver, the urban renewal plan that we have going on, that project, that's industrial A also. If we're gonna look at industrial A, let's have all industrial A. So the North Carver would be industrial A also in the urban renewal plan. That would be my second proposal, and to get rid of the one that with 80 Makepeace and Ocean Spray, because that's just out there, to be totally honest. So that's what I will be presenting at town meeting, and I just wanna let everyone know, this is where I'm at, this is the reason for it, and I'm sure you guys will come back and say, oh, you can't do that, you have to change the use of it first. But no matter what, that would be my presentation for it, because it does actually allow it, even in that small little spot where you have Dunkin' Donuts, it would increase it to that. So that would be an optimum spot too, to have one. So there is a place for it if somebody wants it. And it can provide a lot of revenue to this town. And
And what type of revenue? What numbers?
the numbers depends on who.
I don't know.
It all depends on
Yeah,
the
I don't know
establishment that
either.
opens, but the way the law is currently written, the municipality has a right to, I think it's a 2% excise tax, and plus another additional 1% that goes directly to the municipality. So the town gets up to 3% of the sales from that marijuana establishment. Also, what we are seeing very often with these marijuana establishments in any given town, they are offering what is called a host community agreement, a host community offering. So for things like what you have written up there on the board, some of these places would be, you wouldn't necessarily say we're funding it, but they say, these businesses are saying we will kick back an additional 1 to 2% of our sales to the community to be used for whatever community projects you are doing.
That's incorrect, Mr. Chairman. The new act under the recreational marijuana, the host community agreement is required, and it's up to 3%. However, the difference between the medical and recreational, under the Recreation Act, the host community, the community impact fee has to be directly related to the retail or to the marijuana use, to the whatever use it is, cultivation, whatever it is. The money has to be kept in a separate account, and the town has to account for it to the CCC once a year. So it's completely different from medical marijuana, where a host community agreement is not required, and a host community agreement is essentially a contract between the town and the licensee. The 3%, there has to be a nexus for medical marijuana, obviously. There has to be a nexus between the impact and the facility. but it's nowhere near as stringent as the current recreational. You could not take money from a recreational marijuana establishment and build a new field or fix potholes in your road. You could not do that. You could possibly get extra patrols around around the facility, depending on where it is. If it's in an obscure location or something like that, DARE programs maybe, things like that. But that is an incorrect statement that you could fulfill those.
Mr. Chair, I want to clarify too, there's a sunset on that, is that correct, Town Council?
There's
a 5-year limitation?
The host community agreements are for 5 years, and what we have done is, there's nothing in the act that prohibits the host community agreements from being renegotiated. So this is yet another part of the act that makes no sense, because a host community agreement is required for our license, yet it expires after 5 years. So it really puts the licensee in a tough position, because their host community agreement could expire, and the next thing you know, they're out of compliance with their license, because the host community agreement expires at a different time that their license expires. So it's just another thing that really wasn't well thought through. But we put in our host community agreements that they can be renegotiated. So they'll be renegotiated after the 5 years, so the town is protected and the licensee is protected in their license.
If you could just give us your names so that's...
Oh, Alan Germain, 24 Pine Street, sorry. Through the chair, did you say 50,000 square feet?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's, the way the structure is, there'll be greenhouse centers set up from 20 to 100,000 square feet.
I just wanted to clarify that, because unless you've ever seen a 2 or 3 acre greenhouse, you have no idea how massive this structure is. If anybody that's been to Ontario has gone up to QEW and Niagara, on the left-hand side going up there, there's a winery. There are greenhouses along there that cover 3, 4, and 5 acres of land. And I can't tell you how immense these are. And if we get ourselves caught up into this thing where, ooh, I can't wait for 3%, and we start getting held hostage by companies that want to do this commercially in this town, we're 12,000 people in this town. We don't need to be known as Andover, just turned down being the pot capital of the world. North Andover just turned down at town meeting a proposal that would have made North Andover the largest pot grower in the world. And they just turned it down. And that was a sweet deal, but they turned it down and walked away. So this needs a lot of due diligence. I'm in favor of keeping it right where it is in this current proposal. And then next year's town meeting will have had a whole year to play with where else you want to put this.
Yeah, I agree.
Because the last place I wanted is up at the North Carver district, and then all of a sudden it goes out by the airport because that's okay, and then you wind up with your neighbor's bog because we keep changing the laws and changing the laws. And I really don't want that to happen. That's just my personal opinion, but I think this is in its infancy, and I don't think anybody really has a handle on what's really going to happen. And North Andover just went through it. My cousin lives in North Andover, and they were freaking out. There's some serious homes up there. And it was going to be all along the highway, and it was going to become the largest grower in the world, not just the United States. And they said, we're all set, thank you.
And not just to jump in on that, I want to be clear, at our last meeting, I know a lot of people that were at a different meeting. But I want to be clear to the public so that way I can reiterate my position on this. We have a moratorium that's in place today.
Yes.
We're asking the town to renew that again until June of 2019. And the bylaw that we're proposing for the town, we put something together to bring to town to start this process, because it's my interpretation that the state hasn't done their real due diligence
That's right.
on this, and that's my opinion, and that's gonna keep tweaking. But they have 200 applications for licenses.
No doubt.
Like that.
But let's not forget that once we don't all know exactly what we're doing and that 2 acre greenhouse goes up, it's going to be very hard to come in after the fact and say, geez, everybody screwed up, including the state, take it down.
Yes, sir.
Because that won't happen.
A question for town council. Amy, what is the consequence if the town doesn't have either a moratorium in place or an overlay district allowing this use? Did SJC rule on this?
No, the Attorney General has determined that any, that the either the medical, or, well, you have a medical, so the marijuana establishments can go into the town and they can go wherever that use is currently allowed. So therefore, a retailer could go in any district that allows retail. A processor could go in any district that allows, say, light manufacturing. Same with cultivation, you could consider that maybe processing. So that would go where anywhere where manufacturing or processing would go. So that is the reason why we are putting on the overlay and the moratorium, the extension of the moratorium, and that's why it was discussed at the last meeting that we are recommending that the moratorium go out as far as possible, which right now is June of 2019.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Does the moratorium cover, is that just for retail, or again, all of the licensing under the marijuana
Moratoriums
stuff?
for marijuana establishment.
All of them?
Including, it's just recreation?
Yes, just
Not
recreation.
medical.
So
No.
just to give you another idea real quick, when you asked about numbers, and I know something like a 5-acre greenhouse might look a little intrusive. I'm not saying that we need to change anything with this zoning. I understand the property might not be there now, but given what those properties are, I mean, the cement plant isn't exactly something nice to look at when you drive down 58. But on that note, I did just tour the cultivation facility that's about to open in Taunton. I just turned down their job as head cultivator. And it is an 80,000 square foot warehouse in an industrial park. When you drove up to it, it looked completely unassuming. You had no idea it was any different than any other commercial factory in the industrial park. And their projection to me was they were going to be producing $100 million worth of marijuana within 5 years. So 3% of $100 million to a municipality can go a long way. So when you're asking those kinds of numbers, those are the hard numbers coming out of the marijuana industry right now in Massachusetts.
Yeah, Savory Moore, 12 South Main Street. I just want to clarify, make sure that we're clear on one thing. You had talked about the community agreement,
Host community agreement.
the host community agreement being 3% going directly to DARE or extra police patrols.
It's up to 3%, whatever
Up to
the town
3%.
negotiates with.
Right, but the excise tax, which I believe is another 3%,
3.75,
that can go to any use within the town, correct?
once the state gives it to you.
Okay, yeah. Because it's- well, I understand that, but I mean, there are no restrictions on where that money can be used, correct?
That would be taxes, so that would go into.
Okay, I just want to make sure that that was out there.
Good question.
Well, all right, so under, I'm gonna go through your wording now. Under your 5,000.1 under purpose, I love it says to ensure safe access to marijuana, right there. And it's just a comment about that, is that, well, safe access, I mean, basically we're doing no access. Just my opinion, the way it's created, the overlays are, it's basically no access at all. It's not really safe access, it's no access, which I guess you could say that's safe access too, to some
There are
extent.
businesses there, they could sell their property to this. This could be amended, we
I
could change
understand.
this. We're gonna have the moratorium, and then we're gonna.
I haven't gotten to the
but we still-
moratorium
and we still have our areas defined. It could be changed, if we find out that this is a good thing, we could change it. But if it isn't a good thing, we have time to learn about it, so, you know.
So-
I think that's what, we were talking about here, so.
If, the next thing is, under the industrial A districts that you're talking about, it's 60,000 square feet, a minimum lot, 60,000 square feet, 175 feet of frontage. Is the first block on the 80 Makepeace property, is that 175 feet, do you know that? That first little spot before Ocean Spray on your overlay district?
No, cool. Be more specific.
On the Federal Road, we have 80 Makepeace, then Ocean Spray, then 80 Makepeace. On the first little spot of the
I love
overlay,
this.
that
This gives me
small
more
little thing,
specifics.
yeah.
Do you have a lot line? You have a lot number?
I don't have a lot.
And what does it come up with on the zoning map? I love how you put that, Bob.
I know.
That was great.
Yeah, like that. This little spot here, is that 175 feet, do you think?
What is that lot?
That's part of 80 Makepeace property.
If I don't know where that lot is, per the zoning, what the assessors have at,
Right.
I'm gonna tell you it's one
Yeah,
inch.
yeah.
That's my interpretation. You're saying that
It
it's
might not be
100.
the frontage either.
And that's the frontage, well, that's what I'm saying, the frontage is from the roadway, road line there, and.
Just assuming is a false statement, Bob.
I no, I'm just saying, I was just asking a question.
I got it, but if you gave me more information, I'd be able to do it.
Right, no, yeah,
Right.
I was also thinking too,
Yeah,
I mean,
okay.
if two owners that own abutting properties wanted to sell, those lots could be adjoined.
Yeah,
to-
Right,
come in,
yeah.
do an A&R.
But I just wanted to know, because they created that one. Yeah.
Well, it's just
Yeah.
part of the area, but lots can be, put together too.
All right. And then it was, the setbacks on it are just kind of interesting when you start looking at some of the buildings, from the roadway to the buildings on Tremont Street there. They're very close to the road,
Existing buildings,
some of the existing buildings that are there.
already permitted?
Huh?
They're already
Just for
permitted?
businesses, but they may be outside that 50-foot from the roadway in. They may be closer, so that would limit that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there may be buildings that are close, but they may not meet the new bylaws of today. Any new construction would have to meet the zoning bylaws.
But if they wanted to use the existing buildings as retail, then would they be able to?
Take a look at it.
Well, first of all, we haven't, town meeting hasn't adopted it, but say that they do adopt it,
Yeah.
and they're gonna bring a cannabis for retail in that, does it meet the required bylaw that the town passed? In an existing structure. I know where you're going with it, so I like
that's what I'm saying.
it. So Dunkin' Donuts today is 25, 30 feet from the street.
Right.
So if Dunkin' Donuts decides that it's gonna sell to this gentleman here, which he'd be happy.
Well, they really can't, because it's not on the overlay district anyway.
Just hypothetically, that's what you're doing, you're throwing the same things out.
Yeah,
Does it meet the requirement 50 feet back?
So I think what he's asking is.
That's proposed.
right.
It doesn't,
They could.
so it wouldn't be allowed,
50 foot.
You'd have to build a new building.
No, but any.
you know?
Well, that's what I'm saying. But-
It just wouldn't be allowed.
Okay, that's what I wanted to get, this is part of the process.
Yeah,
Unless they put a pot in the donuts.
they probably already do.
Well, then it would be allowed, because,
Not Dunkin' Donuts, but somebody else. Don't you remember the brownies from younger days?
I do. I'm not that old.
All right, any other questions?
I have a question on the moratorium, just I'm a little unsure on how that works. I understand we have a current moratorium. You would be recommending we further it for another year. How does that work with the moratorium in town? Is that just something that's a recommendation of the board
Point
and
of
the
order.
selectmen?
That's
And then you just make it, or is it a vote type of a thing?
point of order. That's a separate article. Why don't we,
Oh, it's
my
separate from this?
recommendation,
Okay, I didn't
Mr.
know.
Chairman, is
Yeah.
we deal with
We
the
already
article.
voted on that. We already voted.
I was just curious how it worked, and then
Yeah.
if you extend it, you don't have to vote on that again, you just are allowed to extend?
It goes to town meeting, and it's just, in a nutshell, it's just really extending it for another 6 months. Because we're out to December anyway, so it'll be another 6 months to June of 2019.
No, the way it was proposed.
Yeah.
That's how it's
What's
proposing it.
proposed?
No, it was initially proposed to the board for a moratorium through
Right,
December
and that's
30th,
why we wanna go
2018,
to that.
and
I
the
misspoke.
AG's office allowed us to
I
extend that
think
to
your
June 30th.
current one ends June 30th.
Yes.
This year.
Yeah.
So it's a zoning change. It's a zoning bylaw change, so it's a 2/3 vote at town meeting.
Yeah, we already recommended that, that's going off the town meeting.
I have more questions. All right, so, under 5000.4 location dimension controls, in here, it doesn't say anything about a church.
Because then it would be tax exempt pot.
The church of members exists.
So I think that it used, with the medical one, I thought it was, church was included in that.
But we're not talking medical.
No, I know that, that's what I'm saying, I'm just saying that medical said church, but no church is in here. And can we insert church into here to say that be 500 feet from a church, or no?
But it's, we're talking about retail, growing establishment. Medical marijuana is a total different,
I understand that.
I know you do.
I know that. What I'm saying is, under this bylaw that's being presented,
Yeah.
What line is that?
that's, it's, I don't know, where are we at? Number 2,
Yeah, it's in
under
the presented
5000.4, where it has to be 500 feet from the following pre-existing usage here.
Thank you.
All right, church isn't included in that, and I just want to know, is there a reason why it wasn't included?
So under the new act, which again is the recreation marijuana, under the regulations, under 935-500, the Cannabis Control Commission specifically states that cities and towns may not have more stringent buffer zones. So, and that's all they say. And so, that being said, this is our recommended language, and we have had cities and towns that have included churches, religious institutions. The problem is that the problem that we've seen, some of the reasons why towns don't want to put that in is because what is the definition of a religious institution? Are you then creating buffers that are so significant that you are not allowing it in your town? So we would have to make sure that whatever you're determining are religious institutions, that they're, even with a 500 buffer around them, that you could still, and the basis is where children commonly congregate, so perhaps you could amend it to religious institutions with, where CCD classes are held, something like that. Would probably, the Attorney General would probably like to see something like that rather than just
Or
religious.
running daycare.
Yeah, exactly.
That's in here.
Yep.
Child care facilities in here.
And as far as I know, I haven't seen any overlays. Any overlays that have passed at town meeting have not yet come back from the Attorney General yet, because we're in the middle of town meeting season,
Yeah.
So I couldn't tell you if any of those towns that did put in religious aspects, if that was allowed by the Attorney General.
So my suggestion, and although you can't do it, it has to be changed at town meeting, is that we do include religious entities that have youth programs that run through it. I think that would be a good thing. Just putting it out there. All right,
This is a prelude to town meeting for a ball.
And between now and then, we will look and see about the whole separation of church and all that stuff, so we can,
okay.
all right?
Okay,
Just real quick, you got that little house up the street here that's a ranch house that's, Joe's Church on the weekends. So,
That's
It's not an
exactly what
overlay
I was
district.
thinking of,
yeah,
something
not
like
you
that.
were thinking of the same thing.
I was.
yeah.
So it's not necessarily the big white steeple,
Right.
it's.
Right. Yeah, well, we have several of those, yeah.
Yeah.
Lady Ford's in the closet next door.
Okay, I have more. All right, number 3, it says cultivation and processing facilities have a buffer strip. Do they have the same setbacks for cultivation and processing?
Yes, the setbacks are what's in the underlying.
Bylaws for industrial A?
Yes.
Just wanted to make
Yes.
put that out there, I just want to make sure they're all together. And then it says on number 6, planning board may impose additional restrictions on signage appropriate to mitigate aesthetic impacts. Is the intent for that wording to limit the type of signage that's there? Or, I mean, is it a design standard that you're gonna be looking at for that?
I'm looking for an example that'll help better define what your thought
So,
is.
say, Joe's recreational pot place, okay? And he wants a sign up there and he wants to put a marijuana leaf on it and stuff like
That's
that.
under state law.
regs.
Well, that's what I'm saying, is it says, what, like, restrictions would you hold on that? Is it on dimension size then, if you can't do that?
So
We have dimensions.
This provision is in here for, the reason why it's in here, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the only reason why it's used, is for, what we do is we usually have the police chief will review plans for a facility. And sometimes the police chief wants to see the sign on a different facade of the building, or wants to see a sign somewhere else, and that is why that's in here. That's really the only reason it's in
Because
here.
in the sign bylaw section of the bylaws, zoning bylaws, there's dimensional sign
Right.
requirements, marquee requirements, stuff like that.
I just wanted to make sure it wasn't a
There may be
design
other cultural
issue.
representations of the product,
Yeah,
dancing bears, or, I mean, pick something out of a hat. So
Yeah.
it may not necessarily be appropriate, just because it's not a marijuana leaf. There's still other ways to represent the product in the signage.
okay. All right. Next one is, I forget which section this is. It's on the next page. It says description of security measures, including employee security policies. I don't know how I want to protect the security features. All right, is there a way to protect security features that are held within? Because there was 2 different areas on the security plan also. There's 2 separate sections there. I just want to protect their interests in what type of security they have, that it's not put out to public, how it is, how it's used. Do you know what it's number III.
That is, the description of security measures, including employee security policies, would be, and that's quite common. In fact, last week I was at a hearing, and the focus of the hearing was the security measures. And what they do is they talk about what their security system, what, where, when there is some kind of break-in, where it goes to. Does it go directly to the police station? Does it go to a person? Things such as cameras. Those are also things that we negotiate in the host community agreement. So the host community agreement is negotiated between the Board of Selectmen and the licensee. And before we negotiate a host community agreement, we have the fire chief and the police chief weigh in on how many cameras they want to see, where they want to see them. There are also things such as how many hours do you have to, after an incident, how many hours do you have to report to the local police? There are state regs on reporting also. And then the employee security policies are, somebody walks in the building, you take their license, you copy their license, photocopy of their license, then in this hearing that I was at, I think the person had to show their license at least 4 times while they were in this one facility. Just to, so there was all these provisions as to what the employee had to ask for and things like that. That's what they're talking about. They're not talking about what type of security system and what is your code or anything like that. However, there will most likely be a Knox box, so the fire chief will have, or someone on the fire department will have a key to get in if they had to.
Which you brought up the hours of operation, it's 9 AM to 8 PM. And I thought that should be increased, because if you treat it similarly to the alcohol establishments or whatnot, that time frame should be increased. Whether, by limiting it to this, it doesn't allow for other times, like a Friday or a Saturday, a later time opening for that, or closing. So I think the option, if you put something behind that, or actually, we put something behind it at town meeting, to say that can be increased to this time, all right, on weekends, no holidays, I think that's in there. But that's the time. Then it goes back to security on number C, 2C, security plan required. Again, just protect privacy of how the security features all work and everything, and like I said, that could be protected from them, of the type of security, what they have, and then under J, it says no outside storage is permitted. That doesn't include like pallets that they may use, or, I mean, when you say outdoor storage, I know you're probably talking about the actual products and everything. You don't want that stored outside, but everything else that's maybe there, like I said, like a pallet or a barrel or something like that, that may be there. I mean, that's not the intent of this, to limit them to not have things that aren't related.
I wouldn't think so.
Okay.
And these are things, we go through all these things with every business that
wanna
comes
go through
before
all this
here.
again,
We
not
go
like town
go
meeting.
through the security, fire security, police security, access to the building by the fire department, these are all things, but these things, this is just kind of like the beginning of all this, so.
I know.
And things could change down the road by state regulation.
Yes.
Right, yeah, so, but, we're just trying to get something
Right.
in place here now, not being.
Just like the solar
really-
project.
Really.
The solar bylaw, just to get something in there, and I know that.
No, I think the solar bylaw wasn't like that. The first solar project, yes, we did have a solar bylaw. That's what we're trying to do now.
Right,
We're
I
trying
know,
to,
that's
we're
what
trying to get this ready, so we don't have another, something like this come in without any bylaws at all.
Okay, my next one is, it says no, 5,000.6 against on-site consumption. I don't want the business to be held accountable for somebody, what they do in their car when they drive away. That's,
There is no on-site consumption currently by the CCC.
right, but I'm just saying is that someone purchases something inside a retail place and then jumps into the car, and as they're driving away, they start eating something or light something up in their car, and that I don't want the business to be held at fault of that, and they come back and say, oh, you have a bylaw violation, the police pulled this car off, they were smoking in there, it was on your premise, we saw them, see you later, we're gonna pull your license.
So-
That's not what on-site consumption is.
Right, but just to bite up that tree, so if you go to a liquor store and buy a bottle of booze and you're driving down the street and you pop it open, start drinking, and you kill somebody, they're gonna go back after the establishment also.
Well-
It's proven fact,
Yeah, but the establishment's not at fault.
but
If they were a
they're still gonna
bar,
go
they
back
were-
after.
Yeah.
They're not a
They're
liquor
not
store.
a liquor store. Because God knows nobody drinks and drives in this state.
I got plenty of nips on my side of the street, so
Oh, God,
don't
right.
even go
I
there.
almost thought you were
huh?
gonna say on your.
That's what I thought he was saying too. It's with a cop or why he does this when it comes to these
That
things.
would definitely explain a
And
lot.
now I would understand.
All right, what else do we have?
Oh, he's
I'm
got.
done, I got them all, I got all my topics.
All right.
Thank you.
Could I add one
Call
thing?
the question quick.
Council, I believe that the regulations do specify that any cannabis establishment maintains security in their parking facility that there is no loitering or on-site consumption. So it is in the regulations.
On-site consumption it consists of you are being served something.
Right, so
There's
not
a
to confuse the
definition of
terms.
on-site consumption. That is not on-site.
Illicit consumption, yeah.
So you can't have like free brownies, take a bite and see it.
No.
I suppose you could.
Actually, Mr. Chairman, I have one more thing to say, and this is the last one.
You promised us that was the last.
Well,
one.
I just want to make it clear, number one, I do not smoke marijuana. I don't. I want to make it perfectly clear, I don't. Although I agree with it, I do not smoke. I just want to make it clear to everyone.
We're happy that you're a healthy
Whatever is that
person.
clear to?
All right. So this is, so any other discussion? Any other questions? Discussion by the board members? Anything else?
Mr. Chair, I'm gonna make a recommendation to, make a motion to recommend for town meeting, let me get the number first, hold on. Zoning amendment number 4.
I'll second that.
So you have a motion and a second, any further discussion? Those in favor?
Aye. Thank you, everybody, for your input. It's
Thank you,
greatly
yeah.
appreciated.
Yeah,
Yeah, we're sorry.
It was good to have the input. I mean, but this kind of prepares
It's all
everybody for
about
town
the
meeting too.
process.
so.
Anything new?
Is that it?
That's what we're
Is that
gonna
the
have.
only ones that we were waiting on?
We already did 5.
Let's see, 5.
Yes, you did. You voted on
Yep,
5 at the
was
last
extended.
meeting.
5, okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and you recommended it.
Okay.
Okay.
I believe I have a copy of this.
Okay, so as we continue on, planning board member notes.
I don't have anything.
Do not have anything
Okay.
this time.
Planning director notes.
Mr. Chairman,
Yep.
last week we were called to the site location of Lynbia's Path. Some further disturbances In that development, you may recall that the planning board had authorized planning staff to issue a cease on the project because the 30-foot no-cut buffer along Lot 1 was impacted, causing the root structure to be compromised. In the storms we had in January, February, March, many trees were fallen onto the property, and it was the planning board's direction that the developer shall not receive any further action or activity on that site until a revised site plan has been submitted to the staff. We've not yet received a revised site plan, and furthermore, there's been some additional disturbances out there. Having worked with the developer, it was agreed that the developer will hire a licensed land surveyor and submit a report to the community, to the department, identifying where the property lines are. The activity that's been going on out there has so far obscured where those lines are. And when we receive those revised site plans and land surveys, we will report back to the board that the project is likely at that point ready to move forward. We're engaging with the neighbors so that nothing is done in a vacuum, and they have so far been more than readily available to engage staff and the developer.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, through you to, for procedure, I just want to go back to the zoning articles. Should we take a motion to close the all the public hearings on that?
Yeah.
On the zoning articles?
Yes, the warrant has been published, so any further changes would be on town meeting floor anyway.
I make a motion to close the public hearing on all the zoning articles, just because we finished.
Right.
And before you go, we do need to confirm how some of these licenses were issued, these alcohol licenses. So that might be one minor change on town meeting floor.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if it's okay with you and the board, I'll be glad to do that research with the select board staff. They were the ones who actually provided me with the initial list, so we can confirm that all those licenses we have in form were issued in compliance with, was it 138?
138, section 15, I'll send it to you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Great, thank you. Outside, we have a motion to close the public hearing. Do I hear a second?
Second that.
Have a motion, a second. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I just wanted to check the box. I missed it.
And then we did approve everything, so we're all set there.
The minutes of the March 27th, I don't think we can do that because Kevin wasn't here. So there'll only be two of us.
So we'll table that till next meeting. And our next meeting date is,
May 22nd.
May 22nd is the next, well, that's to when we extended the public hearing for Edaville. If the board wishes to meet before then.
I'm good with that, 22nd. Before
And as it were, the staff has no other pending business before the board but for Edaville at this time.
okay. Okay, why don't we schedule for May 22nd unless something comes up and you have to contact us.
We already made that schedule, right, for the 22nd?
Yeah.
22nd, yeah.
Right. All right,
All right.
motion to adjourn.
Have a second?
Second. I second that.
We have a motion, a second. Those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.